Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. The Be Fulfilled Journal helps you be more honest with yourself and with others and be more open to handling things you've avoided dealing with for years. It's a 12-week online and journal program that helps you identify and eliminate things you do that are causing you stress and live in more gratitude and joy. It was actually developed by a long-term friend of mine who got sober in 2008, and he's put together a great deal just for my listeners. You get the 300-page hardcover journal and access to the 12-week video program online, plus free shipping, plus membership in a private Facebook support group with others going through the program, plus a 5-day mini course showing you how to let go of stuff that's draining your energy, plus a 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. To start your journey and get all the bonuses, go to BeFulfilledJournal.com/ELG. That's BeFulfilledJournal.com/ELG. Hey, everybody. This is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. I have one of my New York homies again with me today. We're with Mark Plati. He is a New York-based producer, engineer, musician. He's been involved with the music scene since age 10. Started with playing snare drum in the elementary school band in Aurora, Colorado. Next, he started studying drums and electric bass with Duke Ellington's nephew, William, throughout middle and high school in Hartsdale, New York, which is just north of New York City. Then a variety of instruments while at Indiana University, which is a great program. I'm surprised I don't hear more musicians that have gone there because it's a great music program, as well as enrolling in the School of Music's audio tech program. He played on his first recording session with Ellington's jazz ensemble at the age of 16 and was subsequently drawn to sound and the recording studio. By his sophomore year at Indiana University, he was engineering and performing on sessions and recording orchestras and jazz ensembles while also gaining valuable real-world experience doing live sound in the bars and clubs in Bloomington. So basically, he's the sound guy. He's the guitar player. He's the drummer. He's that guy. Was a show In Living Color? How many jobs you got, man? After college, Mark moved to Dallas, Texas, where he learned the true meaning of freelancing. He simultaneously interned on a 48-track remote recording truck, engineered sessions at 3 studios, produced an album for a Dallas band, and played bass in local bands. He moved back to New York City in '87, began working with dance music legend Arthur Baker at his Shakedown Sound Studio, again as an engineer, mixer, synthesizer programmer, and musician, which quickly led to work elsewhere. Between '87 and '91, Mark worked with such luminaries as Quincy Jones, Janet Jackson, the Talking Heads, Fleetwood Mac, Lou Reed, Oingo Boingo, Dream Academy, the Fat Boys, the Bee Gees, and others. After working with Prince on the Graffiti Bridge album, he decided to leave the world of dance music and remixing, but to then incorporate those sensibilities as he made a move into more mainstream record production, a philosophy he still continues to embrace. During the 90s, Mark worked with Nina Hagen, New Order, Natalie Imbruglia, Suzanne Vega, Al Green, Big Audio Dynamite, Shawn Colvin, D. Light, and others. Dude, there's enough celebrities in here. This is like I got no more names to drop. In '91, he began a 10-year association with minimalist composer Philip Glass at Philip Glass's New York City recording complex called The Looking Glass, where he produced, engineered, mixed, and performed on albums by David Bowie, The Cure, Hooverphonic, Alicia's Attic, Dave Navarro, as well as Philip Glass himself. In '96, Mark co-produced David Bowie's Earthling album, which marked the beginning of a period where he produced, recorded, mixed, or performed on most of Bowie's musical output for the next 7 years until 2003. In 99, while he was with Bowie, he switched gears again. And I don't think he switched gears. He just added more stuff to his plate. He began a 3-year stint as the musical director with Bowie, in addition to being the guitarist and bass player. And he performed with Bowie in Europe and the U.S. at shows like Glastonbury, Net Aid, the Montreux Jazz Festival, VH1 Storytellers, a concert from New York, and the Area 2 tour with Moby, another great artist. He supervised the live execution of 2 complete Bowie albums, Heathen and one of my favorite records, a 1976 classic, Low. In 2005, Mark began a period of working in Paris, producing and mixing a number of iconic platinum artists. He continues working on loads of different new musical adventures. He is in Paris right now on the Shawn, I'm not going to try it, I'll let him say it. And I want to give a shout out to Matt Beck for hooking us up. So thank you, Matt. And Mark, thanks so much for your time, man. I'm so glad to have you on.
Oh, man, no worries. Nice to meet you and talk to you. Hey, Matt Beck.
Dude, I'm exhausted reading all this stuff.
I'm exhausted after listening to that. Oh, my God. I mean, a good thing I spread that over like 30 years or something. I was like, oh, my God.
Well, man, let's start at the beginning. You grew up in Colorado, and then you moved to Hartsdale. What prompted that move? I know you were a young kid then.
Well, actually, I was born in New York, in New Rochelle, which is the fictional home of Dick Van Dyke, as some of us of a certain age know.
That's right.
And we moved to Denver when I was 3, and we moved back to New York when I was 11, almost 11, all due to my father's got a job transfer.
Gotcha.
He was in insurance, and he got in he just took an opportunity to do that, and which was not something really done in those days, especially in sort of Italian-American families. Like, you were supposed to stay pretty close to the nest, but
yeah.
So that was a big move. And I think from that, I learned a lot from that, just like, hey, jumping into something different. And so that was cool. But yeah, moving from Colorado to New York was a bit of culture shock when you're that age. Absolutely. Tell
me about it. What was like some of the funniest things that stand out that you could remember?
Well, I guess going to school was a big one, because when I got there, I was in 5th grade, and I basically already knew everything they were teaching. My school was kind of way ahead of where they were in New York, which kind of lasted all the way throughout my New York time in school in New York. I was always ahead of the curve. And just the kids were a lot rougher, and, it was a lot more diverse. I'd never really, I think we had one African-American kid in my school. Yeah. And this was like half and half, and just, it was very different.
Yeah.
But actually, after a while, it was like, wow, this is cool. All these different kinds of people.
Yeah.
Everyone coming from a different place was really, and at that time in the 70s, it was pretty cool.
That is good, man. Yeah, that's one of my things I like the most about growing up in New York. It's not, I come across somebody with an accent. It's not strange to me. It's not foreign. It's easy. There's no assimilation issues. And I always enjoyed that, man. Okay, but
absolutely.
Then you left New York to move to Dallas. That is an unusual move after you finish school at IU. When you're living in the city, you don't say, "Hey, I'm going to Dallas." I give you credit for that, man. Right? I mean, yeah.
It was another thing of like, hey, there's a door. I was pretty much at that time living in Bloomington, Indiana. I really, really enjoyed college, so much so I spread it over 5 years. I had at one point I had a motorcycle. It was just fun, and I was starting to get work there, and I thought, don't get too comfortable. So I actually went to New York first. I went to New York in the summer of 1984 to do an internship at a studio, because I needed to do an internship to finish my degree in audio science at IU. So I went to New York and knocked on doors, and everybody wanted me to sort of make coffee and do errands and fetch dry cleaning and all kinds of non-music related tasks. And, if I did all that, then at the end of the day, I would actually get to go in and see the console or get to coil cables, all stuff I'd been doing for a couple of years already.
Yeah.
I think what really kicked me there was then they allowed me to watch a session, and these guys were trying to make a flange with a PCM 41, and they weren't very good at it, but they thought they were the and I thought, man, this is goofy. I'm going back to school. So I did. And then there was this studio in Texas that said, they would take interns, and they had a 48 track truck and with a studio. And basically you'd work for free for kind of all the studio time, all the downtime you could eat.
Oh, that's great.
Which was great because I wasn't eating anything else. It was like, these were like some seriously starving years, which was also cool because I was in it 24/7. I mean, we didn't even own furniture. It was, but it was okay. It was like the first time I saw Macintosh. I would record bands on downtime. But we worked hard. I would assist on sessions straight away. And again, I stayed there. I started to get work. I started to, have friends and relationships and started playing around. I thought, don't get too comfortable one more time, which has kind of been another guiding principle, I suppose. Like staying in one spot too long and saying, well, analyzing like, what is this? And I knew Dallas would not be a city for me. I used to go to Austin a lot because I had some friends there, and that was helpful. But at the time, it was like I needed to then move on and make a choice as to where I was going to go next.
Man, I give you credit to, at that young age, to have the foresight to think like that. Like, don't get too comfortable here.
Yeah, I don't know where that's from.
No, because that's not normal. I certainly didn't have like that kind of an awareness at that age. That's really good that you did, man. Honestly.
Well, I guess it's kind of, you reach a certain point in a pond. Like, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond? And that's good for a little while. And then go, well, the pond's not so interesting anymore. And, I could be a big fish here, or I could, get into something else and see what that's like. So life's too short, I guess.
Yeah, man. Well, seriously, props to you for thinking like that. So then after Dallas, you then moved back to the city. What prompted that move, and how'd you get hooked up with Arthur Baker?
Well, I decided Dallas was not going to be my life. So at that point in the recording industry, and then there were kind of three places I could really go, which were Los Angeles, London, or New York. So I went to LA and decided that really wasn't for me. It's kind of too much driving, and it just wasn't my vibe at all. And I had a friend that went to London as an engineer and keyboardist, and he was sort of like, "Yeah, come over here." The scene there was pretty popping in the mid '80s, and I thought, there's some, immigration things and whatever. It's like, well, I could try to do that, but I thought, I'm going to try New York one more time. So I did that. I went back to New York and I did the same thing like before. I was, knocking on doors, like saying, okay, well, now I have all this additional experience, and how about getting right into like, an assisting gig or whatever. And, a lot of them were still like, no, you got to go through the whole gopher thing and whatever.
Even with all that experience you had.
Yeah, they wanted you to go through their whole thing, like kind of, they had a procedure. There was like a method to it at that point. If you wanted to be an engineer, that was kind of the thing.
Man, that's crazy.
I almost got hired at this place called the Hit Factory, which was
Bon Jovi, right?
No, he was the Power Station.
Oh, okay.
Close, yeah. And I almost got in, but and the guy there, Troy Germano, was like, yeah, cool, whatever. And then they called and said, you're not quite Hit Factory material. And I thought, well, material for what? For making decaf or something? Like, like what, what does that even mean? Like,
right.
So,
is that what they said?
Which is
like you're not hit factory?
Yeah, I was not hit factory material.
God, that's so
as a gopher.
Fucking arrogant. I cannot stand.
Maybe they
shit
thought
like
I couldn't run fast enough to pick up the beer. I don't know. But it was fine. And then I decided after that, you know what? There's a ton of studios in New York. I'll go to kind of the second tier of studios, because there's tons of little tracking rooms and whatever. And I don't need to go to these, big places. And it's clearly not going to be my thing. So in the course of doing that, I knocked on Arthur Baker's door. He had a studio called Shakedown Sound. It had a solid state Logic in it, had a bunch of MIDI stuff, because he was doing remixes, which is basically getting, tapes from artists and getting rid of most of the stuff and adding, beats and additional keyboards and making kind of a new song out of it for clubs and what have you. And I just happened to go there on the right day when they needed somebody.
Good for you. Hey, man, even a broken clock's right twice a day, right?
Kind of, and it was like, yeah, you can get into assisting right away. I was like, oh, cool. Wow. The only problem with that was that the aforementioned like remixing and synthesizers and sequencing and all that, which I didn't know anything about. I was like a rock and roll bass player, engineer guy. I had no idea, but it was like, you know what? I don't know. I'll see what happens. All I can do is fail spectacularly, or maybe I can swim, So it was one of those things. I'm going to stay up all night looking at manuals and what have you, and this and that, and yeah, after a bit, I really worked my way into it. And they were actually, they were very keen to use me because Arthur realized soon that I could not only technically, grasp all this stuff, but I had a musicality that lent itself to this stuff. Because a lot of times they'd be adding, music and samples to these things, and they wouldn't quite work. And they're like, why doesn't it work? I'm like, well, yeah, because, the song's in D and the sample's in E flat or whatever. You got to what? Oh, yeah. So it was kind of adding a lot of that, or even actually starting to play things on these remixes, because after a while I figured out kind of the method to that. So I really worked myself into that world, and it was really fun to do. And again, it was like a whole new pond I knew nothing about, but after a while, I got the hang of it, and I ended up mixing within 9 months of arriving in New York at his place. So that would never have happened anywhere else, I don't think, not at that time.
That's such a cool story, man.
Yeah,
you're obviously like driven, but you seem like really mellow. Or is this just like age mellowness? Because I'm like, wow, this guy's he's super focused, very bright, a high level of awareness, but you're like really like chilled out.
I think there's a little of that. I mean, there's kind of a chill veneer, perhaps.
Okay, no, that's what I'm asking. Yeah, no, that's what I'm asking, because I'm like, wow, this is like, yeah, we did this. I'm like, whoa, that's not, not like your New York veneer, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I used to, and there were a lot of those people around. And I remember, because I used to assist some really big engineers. They used to come through there to mix, and some of these guys, man, they were total New York people, and yeah. And I didn't really, and it was probably part of growing up in Colorado. I had more of a different take on things, but it was fun working with those guys. They were all characters.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about some of the people you've worked with. If you could talk about maybe how you got the gig and a cool or interesting story or funny story about working with them. So let's start with Quincy Jones, who's just such a talent.
Well, I never actually met Quincy. I worked with Arthur on a Quincy Jones song that Ray Charles sang. I believe it was I'll Be Good to You, which is a Brothers Johnson song. And Quincy did it. Yeah, you remember that being in the New York 70s.
Absolutely, man.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got Strawberry Letter 23 going through my head. Gotta talk amongst yourselves. But anyway, so he didn't come. A lot of these remix sessions, they didn't, the artists wouldn't come. They would just send their tapes. And they just weren't interested in the process, or like Quincy was in LA. But it was cool to have these tapes and, raise vocals on tracks 19, like, oh my God, you'd just freak at this stuff. And you'd hear how people would record things and go, wow, they get a snare drum to sound like that, or they did it. So that was like, an amazing thing. And we did a lot. There were a lot of artists that it was like that, where I think we did Fleetwood Mac and they never showed. There was a lot like that. We did the Bee Gees once, and Arif Mardin did come. And he was cool. It was just like, he came in the room and I was like, I was like celebrity shocked when he walked in the room, like, oh my God, the records this guy's done. And, but he was, of course, the coolest guy, who I encountered, I encountered a few years later in an elevator with Bette Midler, of all people.
That's so
in a studio.
random.
Yeah, totally random. Yeah. Well, they were in the studio next to us, and they left when I did, and that was funny though. I just saw him again, and but sometimes people like Talking Heads, Chris and Tina came, and they spent quite a lot of time with us, and they were really nice people and very into the process. And
what did you do for them? You were mixing their record?
We did a remix of a song from the last Talking Heads album they did.
Very cool, man.
Yeah. And then there was Lou Reed.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Dude, that's an icon in New York. So they're Talking Heads.
That's a chapter unto itself with Lou, because over the years I had a few encounters with him. And what was funny about that was he would never remember me from the time before. And the first time I met him was with Arthur. He came in to actually mix a song with Arthur. And Lou was he's like a super gearhead and really meticulous. And that's kind of not really, Arthur is more instinctive, and it was, watching that dynamic was like, oh boy, how's this going to turn out? But it was cool, actually. It worked out pretty well. And then I met him a few years later when I was with David. At one time in between, I can't remember that though, but I know I met him like 3 different times. And the last time, I think my daughter actually scared him out of a restaurant, if I'm not mistaken. She was about 3, and he came in. He sat at the booth next to us, and she was just being a 3-year-old, and Lou wasn't having it, And then he looked at me and he said, "Hey, you're that guy." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're that guy with David, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he says to me, "He's a really great singer."
That's what he had to say about Bowie.
I said, "Yeah, he is."
Yeah, he's got a pretty good voice.
And then he up and left, and that was it. It was pretty funny that, but I had
Where was that?
That was in I was at a crazy restaurant in New York called Shopson's down in the West Village. That's Shopson's is a whole other.
Shopson's, that's still around, man.
Yeah, they moved to Essex Market.
Right,
yeah.
right. I've never been there, but I've read about them tons of times.
Yeah, it was
Is it like a
local?
Was
a moment in time.
It's kind of like a local place, right?
A totally local place, like in the West Village. And, they sort of knew you, and they would kick you out if you used a cell phone. They had like rules, and
it's so funny, man. I'm going up there in April, so maybe I'll go check out Shopson's.
You should. Yeah, it was funny but that's where with Lou and all that. So.
That's great, man.
Lou was great though. That was a really great experience working with Lou. And then I think after that, the bigger one was probably Prince. I think.
What was that like?
Well, Prince was one of those phone calls that you sort of dream about getting. because I'd been doing all these I was really in that world, and I'd been working with a couple of different remixer guys in addition to Arthur, and Prince wanted one of them to work on this record on Graffiti Bridge. So he called and said, and I want to bring my engineer programmer with me. And so then I got a call and said, hey, can you get on a plane for Minneapolis in like 2 days? And
so he wanted to bring you to him instead of him to New York.
Oh, we were going to Paisley Park. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah. Which was, and it took me, I don't know, maybe half a nanosecond to say to that thing. So in 2 days, I'm on a plane to Minneapolis, and, all of a sudden I'm in the legendary Paisley Park, and Prince has got he's working with us, on this record. He's rehearsing for a tour on a soundstage, and he's editing the Graffiti Bridge movie all at the same time. Yeah. And he's just kind of bouncing around. And I'd heard then about his sort of legendary energy and how he could sleep an hour a day or something. And I saw it. I was like, oh, man, that was and he was cool. He said very little. He was always dressed like Prince, which was pretty. that was pretty cool. I was like, man, he's going to surprise us and come in wearing jeans, but he never did.
Oh, he was always dressed. It's funny. I heard that about too. Yngwie, like someone said. I've talked to a couple of guys played for Yngwie, and they said it was really weird. He comes to sound check in leather pants, and the guy was like, "Are we playing now? What? Like I thought this was just sound check." And he goes, "No." He goes, no, why?
I could see that. Some people really, that's how they feel most comfortable, I suppose. Yeah. So there you go. So that was, and that changed my life. That was like having his name on my resume. It was never the same after that, in a good way.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I did kind of take a little leap after that. Then sort of people believe that, hey, this guy can do stuff. So, thank you, Prince Rogers Nelson.
Awesome, man. That's a great story. I mean, but you know what, man? But you deserved it because you had. I know how hard you worked and how many doors you knocked on. Oftentimes it's not the work; it's the process of figuring this shit out. How do you get there? Studying it. That's where all the grit is, really, man. And
absolutely. And then when that door is open, and having it together so that you can sail through it.
Yeah.
And being ready, and that's part of it, big part of it.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's the filter also. Because if you're not willing to go through the first part of the door knocking and humping it, it's like a vetting process, sort of,
Yeah, the whole thing's kind of like a war of attrition. I mean, people are just they're just gonna drop off. They're just gonna get discouraged. They're gonna go, this is too hard. Oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. The money's not good. All kinds of reasons, and then all of a sudden, there's think about this now, like of the people I started out with, I mean, there's not many that are left. I mean, there's not so many lifers among us.
Yeah, totally, man. Hey, talk about your experience, Mark, working with Bowie. How did you first get connected with him?
Like a lot of things, it was just sort of total accident. Like knocking on Arthur's door at the right time. I had a room in Philip Glass's studio. I'd had a room there for a couple years. I discovered his place doing a mix for somebody. And I thought, wow, this place is great. And I just kind of started to gravitate to it. And I thought, after I had my first child, I was doing all my work at home, like programming. I thought, I need a room to work in now. So they had space, and I just basically had a room there.
So you rented a room? Is that how it works?
I did, yeah.
And you had access.
Within his,
okay.
and I had basically what I would do is a lot of the artists I would work with, I would bring them there for, overdubs or for whatever, or mixing. And so I got really familiar with the place, with the studio. But I was kind of like the only rock person, sort of under that roof at the time. And David came to look at the place because Philip had done like an adaptation of Low in Philip's way. So they knew each other. And David came to see the Looking Glass, and he really liked it. I mean, there's a window in it, which is, point number one. You can sort of see time pass. And there weren't many studios with windows back in those times. In fact, that was the first one I knew of.
Where was that?
It was in NoHo. It was on Broadway and Bleecker Street.
Oh my God! What a freaking convenient location.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. I was living on the Upper West Side at that point, but then I moved downtown, and it was it was a 5-minute bike ride for me to get there.
Such a cool area right there, man.
So he came there, and he didn't have anybody come with him as an engineer. He came with Reeves Gabrels, his guitar player.
Yeah, sure.
And so, they decided to work with me because I knew the place, and I was only going to work for a week on like some song demos or what have you. But we all got along so well. It was, David, at the end of it, he said, I'm going to come back here in the fall. I'm going to make an album with you. And I thought, oh, yeah, sure you are. People say these things all the time. And,
sure. They're in the moment.
So you'll forget about this in a couple of days. Whatever. Right. But no, he did come back in late August, and we started the Earthling album. And then he called a couple of weeks before and said, come up with some tracks that we can play around with. And I said, ooh, sure.
So he wanted you to do like co-writes?
Kind of, come up with some tracks we can play with. And so I did end up sort of doing a bit of that. Like making that record, a lot of it was David and I and Reeves in a room together, coming up with ideas and just bouncing it off each other. And that was an amazing thing. And it was also, that was my first record using a computer as a sequencer recorder. And so I was doing it in there, and we were doing one idea that David had, and he said, okay, take this part, make it a verse, take this part, make it a chorus, la, 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 and he was used to doing all this on tape. So he says, okay, Reeves and I are going to go out for lunch, whatever, and we'll come back in a few hours and see how you're doing. Because he's big on tape, this is going to take forever. It's going to take a while on editing, blah, 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 blah. So, but then I said, hey, hold on a sec. So then I just do a little, cutting and paste. And I said, well, I'm done. And I saw the light bulb go off over his head. Like he understood that straight away. Like, wow. Oh boy, look what we can do. So that was sort of the beginning, I think, for all of us, for really getting into sort of synchronized sort of MIDI audio sequencing. And I wasn't playing, I was adding little keyboard things, but I wasn't playing anything on that record. Reeves was playing guitar, and then we brought in the band, and Gail Ann Dorsey played bass, and Zach Alford played drums. The first time I'd met Gail, I'd met Zach before because he was part of the sort of New York Soup.
Yeah.
But I didn't play on that record, although Reeves found out I was a guitar player. And, later on I actually played some bass on he was doing a solo record around that. I played some bass on his record.
Oh, Reeves' record.
Yeah, on Reeves' record at that time. But yeah, at that time I was just MIDI guy and mixer engineer, which was plenty for me because, and again, that was another thing that really, that changed everything. That really changed everything after David.
Having Bowie, I mean, between Prince and now Bowie, it's like there's not much higher on the food chain you're really going to go.
No, there wasn't,
Yeah.
which is definitely something I discovered after that. Because things did change, and all of a sudden, people were, kind of looking for me. But they were looking for me to kind of do exactly what I did with David. And we had made this kind of drum and bass inspired album. And it's something I'd been trying to do, I think, for all of the 90s, given my sort of dance background. And I really wanted to combine, rock with beats and sequences and stuff like that. And he was finally the artist that really wanted to go there. So for me, I climbed the top of a mountain. And after that, I was like, all right, well, I did that. Now I think I just want to play acoustic guitar. I want to do something else.
Right.
I've done this, and I don't really want to, I don't want to do it for the rest of my life. But, producers, like anybody, you get typecast and say, oh, he's the guy that does that. Because no one would let me make a rock record in the early 90s either. Like, well, you're the remix guy. Like, this is what the American industry was like.
I think that's just in people in general. They tend to categorize. It allows them to identify something.
They do, and I understand that. But then that was also part of like why I ended up doing a lot of work in Europe in the early 90s, because they kind of understood that, like, wow, if you work with Prince, you've got a lot more under the hood than just making this one kind of record or whatever. Yeah. So I ended up doing a lot there. But after David, they just, everybody wanted to make this kind of record. And I just I got tired of that end of the industry in general. And I realized that was maybe another glass ceiling I'd hit.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm just wary of being locked into, locked into a pond, I suppose. I don't want to just be doing the same. To me, that's not interesting. To be making the same record over and over is not interesting. Over the course of I'm not going to learn after a while. It's like, okay, well, I know how to do this. I want to do something else. So after a while, then David called me for the next album, which he'd already started with Reeves as demos. And they said, well, we want you to play fretless bass on this.
Oh, that must have felt so good.
And I thought, that's what I need. That's what I need.
Yeah.
I need a call like this. Like, what? Wow. And of course, because I had like in the 80s, I'd had a little love affair with fretless in the 80s. I got one from somebody for a couple $100. I think when I was in Dallas. And I played nothing but that for a year. I was just so in love with it. A 73 precision without lines that I kind of modified with a PJ setup. And I still play that bass. That bass it's great. So I played that bass. And then I also ended up playing some I had a 73 jazz bass. I ended up playing that some too. And I ended up, mixing the record, and I ended up playing a little acoustic guitar too in the end. And at the end of that record, David was going to do this show on VH1 called Storytellers. And I knew they were going to need an extra person because some of the songs he wanted to do had acoustic guitar in them. And I thought, let me do one show. I can play it, and you know me, and I know you, and la, 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 la. And I just want to do one gig just to,
So you asked him, you said you pitched yourself.
I did a little
Good for
bit.
you, man. See, you lie. Yeah. You said, oh, I'm not a good marketer. Blah. If you don't put yourself out there, shit doesn't happen.
Yeah, but that was it was a no-brainer because, I was, if he didn't know me, it'd be different. But
yeah, but if you didn't put yourself out there, he wouldn't have done it.
That's true too. And he said, yeah, well, hey, that makes total sense. So I did that show. That was my first Bowie show, and I'm scared to death on that show.
I'm sure
it was kind of a little out of body experience, because to be in the studio with him was one thing, but to be on stage with him singing was just a whole other ball game. And then after that, I just never left the band. Because he was like that. He sort of like when he met me, and he would have this sort of antenna for people and say, "Oh, he's like a casting director. This guy's good for this." And so then I was engineer, mixer person. Then all of a sudden, oh, this guy's good for this now. So then I ended up in the band, and I became the band leader after Reeves left. And
who came in after Reeves?
Which is something. Yeah, I did. After Reeves, it's just I was pretty much a rhythm guitar player, and I played a little bit of bass. Gail and I would swap on a couple songs, but it was and it was also something I really decided, I will do this. It's like, given that I was getting a little kind of over the record industry and being in this kind of cycle of making the same record, I said, I'll do this. Why not? I'm going to leave the recording industry for a while, but I don't think this can really hurt me in any way, in terms of how people see me. If anything, it's going to maybe expand their horizons as far as who I am and what I can do. So I did that for a good 3 years or something. And I don't know, that was just one of the greatest times. My first real gig was Net 8 at Wembley Stadium.
Holy, that's like 500,000 people or something?
I think that was something like 80,000. And I'd never done a stadium show, anything like that. And there was one song I had to start by myself, and I'm just standing there like, I'm going to piss myself. How am I going to do this? But you do it. And I realized later that, stadium gigs are actually pretty easy because, you don't really see people. They're just this kind of this blob of moving whatever, It's because the next day we played a show for, I think, 500 people, and it was in a club, and they were all kind of right on the stage. And that was harder because people are right there, like watching you and, watching your fingers, and if you sweat or something, I was like, wow, this is harder.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found that to be a little bit more, but it was also more rewarding because the one thing I was also missing from recording work was the reaction of an audience and seeing like what this music was doing to people. Because I know growing up, all my, all the records I had and how they moved me and moved some of my friends and things like that. And so, to make a record that really people, they want to play, and that's a cool thing to do. But I was missing that by, being in the studio all the time. So it was good to go out and kind of remember what it was like when I started this as a teenager, going, wow, we play music, people like it, and that's it. It's really simple. And it was nice to reconnect with, that really basic feeling of how music really connects to people. And that makes me think of something else, actually, where when I was in college, and I used to play with this choral group as a guitar player. And we went overseas. We went to Greece and to Yugoslavia to do a bunch of shows. This is like 1985. So, Yugoslavia is still Yugoslavia.
Yeah, the wall.
Communist.
Yeah, right.
So that was pretty intense. And Greece was amazing. But the greatest thing about it was that, we couldn't communicate with these people, but man, they love music. And it just hit me like, you know what, this is this is what I need to really do, is do something that connects with people. This really cements it for me.
So, okay, so a few questions.
I got a little off the track there, sorry.
No, this is awesome. Are you kidding? This is really interesting. So, really, when you decided, I mean, you couldn't have had a better script. You decide, hey, I need to leave recording, the process of recording for a while, and David Bowie comes in and gives you a gig. I mean, that's like, you couldn't have asked for anything better.
I mean, how stupid would I have been not to do that?
Oh my God. No, but it was what you wanted. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
But I did consider it, though. I did say, well, I'm sort of leaving my chosen career, so to speak. And, I'm going to get a little out of the flow. And because, after a while, people don't call you if you're not sort of in the soup.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, but the soup is getting a little old, and I don't like the game. And, there was like with record labels and people in labels, playing that whole game. And it's really interesting because a lot of the people that were in there, they're no longer doing it,
Yeah.
I'm still here.
Wow.
It's funny that, but I got tired of that. Like, who are you playing golf with kind of thing. Sometimes that's just not my thing at all.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at that. Like,
no, that's a separate skill set that
it really is.
Yeah, it really is.
I just don't possess, for better or for worse. I just, I wish I could sometimes, but I'm just really bad at that.
No, I know. I get it, man. It's you want to do things because you enjoy them or they're sincere, and it's really hard to do stuff that's outside of either.
Yeah, that's not. I don't know. That's not musically fulfilling in some way. We all have to do.
It's not fulfilling in any way, musically or
well,
for most people, for a lot of people.
Well, sometimes there are jobs that come along that music is kind of meh, but there's a big old check attached to it, and you say, well, and then you kind of weigh the options, go, how long is this going to take? Blah, blah, blah. And because it says, well, if I do this gig, then I can do this other one that, I really want to do, but they don't have a whole lot of money. And it's like, well, I can do that one. Then you can kind of balance out some of these things. But sometimes those are not worth it.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes that's a hard lesson to learn too. That maybe it's not worth it to do those things sometimes.
Do you happen to know Greg Suran, Suran?
I don't actually.
So he lives in Chicago, but he spent most of the time in LA, and he's on American Idol now, and he's long-term, very successful, sideman. And he said something. I just interviewed him yesterday, and he said something. There was three things he said. He said one thing, about things he's realized in the business. One thing leads to another. He said, you have to put yourself out there and you have to be willing to take a risk. And I think if you're not doing it, the only way you're going to move forward is by doing at least one of those things. So like in your case, you considered not taking the Bowie gig and you said, hey, well, I'll give it a shot. I'll take a risk. And it worked. And I think everything's like that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that.
Yeah.
And, maybe add, try to be as fearless as possible. I mean, that was something from working with David that I got he just would try anything. And sometimes I'd be sitting there, behind the board going, you want me to do what? And thinking like, this is insane. I wouldn't say that, but I would
of course.
Like, that's crazy. And then I would try it and I go, oh man, he's, or it wouldn't work. And then it would lead him somewhere else that would. And you say, well, this is what happens when you just you try anything, you get out of your comfort zone and you try something, and sometimes it really works. And you kind of have to do that.
You can't connect the dots moving forward, man. That's the thing. You got to just, like you said, try anything and then see where it lands you.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's kind of no rhyme or reason to this as far as like, you know, if I work at this for 10 years, I'll get a promotion to executive vice president. It's, you know,
yeah.
it ain't that at all, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, what are you working on now that you're excited about? Speaking of taking a risk and getting out of your comfort zone.
Well, I'm in Paris for the whole month of March, and I'm working on a musical called Madame Pink. And I co-wrote the music to this over the course of the last 4 or 5 years with an artist here who I met through another artist, who I met through another artist, who I just happened to do a record with by chance. So that's the trail there.
Yeah.
And he approached me to do this. He said, you know, because he had a little more in the theatrical world, and he had a relationship with this director. And he said this director had this idea about you and I writing songs together, and then he would build a musical around it. And you know, he has definite ideas about, you know, what kind of music, you know, and influences and things like this. And I said, well, you know, I know nothing about that at all, but why not? I should just do that. It's certainly not going to hurt me. I mean,
right.
You know, being in a room writing songs with somebody is just never, ever a bad thing. So I think in the summer of 2015, we went out to a little house in Brittany.
Where's that?
That's on the sort of north coast of France.
Okay.
Actually, it was a pretty big house, but it was empty, and it was pretty interesting. So we spent a week there. I was in a room with a computer and a playback system, an ESP Strat, and a MIDI controller keyboard, and that was it. And I think we wrote maybe 15 songs. Then we had another writing session a couple years later and did a bunch. And then they chose from that pool. And then we put this play on in Rome 2 years ago to just kind of try it out. And at that performance, a French theatrical producer was there and said, hey, I want to put that on in Paris. So in the intervening time, they rewrote a bunch of it, because this is what you kind of do in this sort of workshopping phase of theater. Is you go, okay, well, this works, this doesn't work. It's not like when you make a record and you're done.
Right.
It's sort of like it's a work in progress for a while. So they threw out what they thought didn't work and retooled that. We got rid of maybe 2 or 3 songs and added 2 or 3 more that fit the mood a little better. And last time I didn't play, I was just the sort of MD arranger.
So this is a musical. It's a musical, a play, a musical.
It's a musical.
That's
It's
wild.
15 songs in it. And this time I decided that, you know, they really wanted me to play. And so this time I'm playing in it. And what I'm doing is I have a 4-person band. I have a brilliant pianist who's from Sicily, who was from the previous production, and everybody got on so well with him that we brought him along. And then I have 2 musicians I've worked with in Paris for ages, and a drummer and a keyboardist, and I brought them in to be the rest of the band. And what I'm doing is I'm swapping between bass and guitar depending on what song it is, because some songs really need live bass. Some of this stuff has really kind of Motown swingy sort of it's oriented that way. It's like you got to play bass on this stuff, and other stuff has he's playing a Moog bass and I'm playing guitar, so we kind of figured it out that way. What would work best with each, because we just didn't couldn't just take on another musician at this point. But maybe next go around we will. So I'm playing in a show, which is definitely something new for me. I've not really ever done this, but and I never could have told you that this would have happened. Like, you know, I've written songs for a musical that are playing in this theater. It's not like some theater on a back alley. This theater, it's a big theater called the Rond-Point, and it's on one of the main avenues in Paris, the Champs-Élysées. I mean, I look out the street and I see the Arc de Triomphe. It's like, it's that street.
Yeah.
It's heavy, you know, and I said, I could never dream this up, ever, you know.
How many performances have you done so far?
We started March 13th and we're going till the 31st.
How's it going so far? So today, as we're recording this, it's
going
the 20th.
well so far.
Audience seems to like it.
Seems to dig it. All that's good. And, so now already thinking about, you know, what's going to happen next with it. And, so for me, it's cool. It's a totally new experience.
Wow, that's awesome, man. So now you got to get one of these gigs on Broadway or closer to home. That would be cool.
I know, but the thing about this one is that I wrote it, so I have another interest in it entirely. In addition to being a musician, it's like
So you wrote the whole play. Or you
wrote music, yeah.
You wrote music for the play. So you have ownership interest in this now. So now if this goes somewhere else, it's a totally different ballgame.
Exactamundo, Fonzie.
That's awesome, man. So just like this guy picked it up, he heard it. So maybe someone's in the audience. They can say, hey, I want to do this in London.
Absolutely. That's what one hopes for with these things. That's
awesome, man.
You know, it's going to get, you know, it'll become something and have a residency for a longer time. And, you know, the dream is it's in a couple of cities at once, and that's fantastic. And, you know, then I can go home.
So let me ask you this. What's the time? How long till you get bored on this gig? It seems like you have like your lifespan on these are pretty good though. Like it's not like an 18-month run. You got like a 5, you know, at least a 3 to 7 year window on each little.
I have a shelf life, right? It's funny for this stuff. Right? I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's a little different. I don't think I would play it forever.
Yeah.
Just because. Unless it was in New York, I mean, it takes me away from home.
Sure.
So it's kind of already built in that I couldn't do this long term in a city that wasn't my home. But I don't know if it was in New York. I don't know, probably.
Do you live in the city?
I do.
Oh, you do. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. Man, well, good luck with this, and I hope it really. I hope it takes off for you, man. I really do. That'll be exciting to see what happens and what your next, you know, what's next what's the next chapter? Because it seems like every little thing turns into a bigger thing, and then it leads you somewhere else, which is like really fun, and it keeps it, you know, exciting.
It keeps it interesting.
Yeah, it really does.
You know, as long as I get to use my skills and things like that, I'm, you know, and I feel like we're making something musically worthwhile. Then I'm open to it. You know, that's sort of my prerequisites. I just don't want to, you know, I don't want to do things for the sake of just doing them, but that they'll become something interesting.
That's wonderful,
for
man.
Everyone else.
So let me ask you this: then you grew up primarily in Colorado, and then you moved to Hartsdale. What was your childhood like growing up there?
In Hartsdale?
Yeah.
Well, I was more of a tween and teen in Hartsdale. And at that time, as you probably recall, I mean, that was a very interesting time for music. I'm sure you remember listening to WPLJ.
Yeah, any WPLJ.
LIR, and even WPIX. Remember, they were the new wave station.
You know what was cool
right?
I used to listen to is WFUV out of Fordham.
Right.
They're
still at it.
Yeah. And you know what else? I used to listen to them for music, but then on Sunday nights, I used to be really into sports. They'd have like this whole One-on-One was the name of the sports show. So I'd listen to that, and then I listened to Metal Shop out of WBAB in Babylon. Do you remember that?
Wow, of course.
Yeah.
And then King Biscuit, Flower Hour.
Yeah.
Oh, all that stuff. But it was that was an amazing time when you think about it. Like, we didn't think about it because we were living it and we were just teenagers.
Right.
But, all the different music that got thrown at us, from all these things, because all sorts of rock and funk and disco and then new wave and punk, and it was all kind of together. And as a musician growing up, it was just like, wow. And we said, well, and as a bass player, God, I used to love to play disco. How much fun was that, right? Just, they're the best bass lines.
Yeah.
But then, I was a Led Zeppelin kid too. And it was, all of it there was, value in all of it. And especially given that, where I was going to school, we had a very diverse school, and, you would hear all this music at school on boom boxes and things. And it was just all over the shop. And you kind of just absorbed it all because it was there. So that was, I think, a big part of growing up at that time, at that place, because I don't think it would have been the same, elsewhere.
No, the velocity was incredible. The speed with which stuff was going on in New York at then musically was pretty amazing.
It was incredible, yeah. And to be, musically coming of age, and I don't know, just it really set me off on this idea of like, all this stuff is good and usable, and I can, that's how kind of in David's band, I ended up doing a lot of that kind of rhythm work, because I grew up listening to Carlos Alomar and Nile Rodgers, and
right.
That kind of came naturally to me. Like, I used to listen to it, I used to play it, and so it's just like, oh yeah, this, not much of a learning curve, because it's sort of in your DNA by that point.
Right. Did you ever? One thing I used to do, I remember it was really cool. Like back then, did you ever go to the 8th Street Playhouse and see Rocky Horror like at midnight on a Saturday?
I did once, but I didn't see it there. I saw it somewhere else, because there was another place that used to show it. I can't remember where. Oh, it was Mad and people throwing toast.
That was like so trippy, man. Yeah.
Oh,
and you come and then you go. It was like a midnight showing, and I remember we'd hang out. This is before they closed Washington Square Park, and you go to the park and you buy loose joints, and it was just like a whole there's a bunch of boxes you had to tick on your night out, and you just tick each box, and then or I'd go to the planetarium at midnight, and you see like Laser Rock or something like that. That was really cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
We used to go to midnight movies. There'd be like the Pink Floyd movie and Zeppelin. And
Song Remains the Same.
Yep. Yeah. And you'd be, God, the theater would stink of weed. And, that's what we did as 16-year-olds. That was
the rite of passage, man.
We don't need no stinking iPhones.
Oh man.
Different sort of times,
Good times, man. It's funny. Maybe you have this. My older kids, my 2 boys are 28 and 27, and they both have said to me, and my daughter's just turned 19, and they said they're really glad they didn't grow up with the phone. I mean, even though they're related, there's a generation gap between them, and the things they were mired in even were much different than my daughter and her friends, which is all you're just cell phone driven.
Totally. Yeah, I see that with my older girl. She's 25, and she's so she kind of missed that, but my younger kids were going through what all the other parents were going through, where, you can't get them off the phone. You have to just, it's confiscation, or, now there's apps to limit use and things like that. But yeah, it's amazing that it's like that.
Well, check this out. My older son, so I have a granddaughter who's almost 5. And
Whoa, dude.
yeah, I know. Believe me. I always, she's grandpa, and I like really want to tell her, can't you call me Craig? But like, I'm still not used to that word after 5 years. But she goes on, I don't know if it's kids YouTube or something, and is literally hypnotized. And to the point where my daughter says, I'm never getting my kid a pad or anything, because this is like, it's like crack, man.
Yeah, it is like crack. Exactly.
Nutty shit.
Exactly that.
Mark, what were some of the lower points or the bigger obstacles that you've had to deal with and overcome throughout this journey, and how did you get through them? Either personal, music related, business, whatever you want to share.
The music business can be pretty demoralizing. And sometimes, I remember a couple of times where I'd be set up to actually work with an artist on an album, and then as soon as like the day before, I would hear like, well, you're not doing it because so-and-so had a hit record last week and they're doing it.
Wow.
So that could really, that'll throw a spanner in the works, and you go, well, God, is it me? Is it what? But it's sort of, it's all dollars and cents, and people just don't handle it well. I think there was a couple of times where I was on projects, and I realized once I was in that I was not a good fit for this. Even like on a personal or musical level, like getting back to the previous thing about doing things for the money.
Sure.
And you say, well, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this. And there was one artist I worked with, and I really shouldn't have done this, but it was a wise business decision to make. And I remember I was in the middle of a situation that any other person would have been, they'd give their right arm for it. And I was just like, get me out of here. Get me out of here. This is not me. But I took away from that, don't make those decisions. Don't make these kinds of decisions, even if there's managers, et cetera, that are saying how good this is going to be, and et cetera, because, if I get in a position and I don't shine, then it's not doing anybody any good.
Okay, so let's talk about gear for a little bit.
Sure.
I'm sure you've had shit tons of instruments over the years. What are you playing right now? Like, what's your go-to guitar, the one you like, and maybe what other two would round out your top 3?
Well, I don't know. Compared to some, friends I know, I've never had that many instruments. I think I have maybe 20 guitars in total.
Well, that's not bad.
I know guys with like 80, because I'm always like, well, I can't play them all. It's sort of, so now I have a baritone, I have a couple of electrics, I have a couple of 12, I have that can cover, ground if I need to.
Sure.
And I suppose my go-to guitar for a while now has been this white 1999 Fender Lone Star Strat, which I got off the rack at Matt Umanoff Guitars in the West Village.
They're closed now. You know that, right?
They are done. Yeah, unfortunately, like all the others. And I remember I was looking for a guitar specifically for this Bowie tour I was going to do.
Oh my God, that is so cool! You bought your Bowie tour guitar at Matt Umanoff's in the Village. That's so awesomely cliched in such a good way,
I know, right?
That is very cool. And
I didn't plan on that being a thing, but I don't know. I always ended up returning to that guitar, which is really comfortable for me. It's got a humbucker in the bridge, so there's that. I eventually modified that with a tap so that I could have a single coil if I want.
Awesome.
Has a 5-position switch, which I also chucked for just a 3 because, the 80s are over and I don't use those sounds in the middle. I got Spurzl tuners on it, which are more solid. But otherwise, I don't know. It just fits me. I think I tend to just go for things like that. At the same time I got that, I also bought a silver Music Man Stingray bass, which I also used. But I think for the most part, I've been a jazz bass person for a while. I think since the early 90s. I was always a precision person. Like I have a 64 Precision.
Wow.
Which replaced the 73 that got stolen, which replaced the 77, which I sold for a Rickenbacker. So it's been, through a few of those. And the Fender I got, which replaced a Gibson EB2 copy because I learned on a Gibson EB2.
What is that?
It's a Gibson bass that looks like a 335. It's a hollow body bass.
Oh, very cool.
Slightly with a shorter scale. And I learned on that bass because that was my teacher's bass. That was Mr. Ellington's bass. And it was like a 60s sparkling burgundy EB2 bass. And I had never seen a bass guitar before I'd seen that one. I was about 12. And I was just like, what does that thing even do? I didn't know. And so I decided, you know what, I'll take, because I was learning drums with them. I said, I'll learn to play that too. Because it was just like this crazy, sexy thing. And so I started there, but then I ended up being a jazz bass person. And I got a 63 jazz bass at Rudy's.
Another iconic.
In the early 90s, and it did not cost all that much. It cost a lot, but it was not crazy money because it had been refinished.
Awesome.
Which meant, of course, the collector thing is down the drain. So,
right.
Which is fine for me. What do I care? I don't need it to be 100% original. But it was just an amazing bass to play, and it still is. And then I got a 73. Because I didn't want to take the 63 out too much, especially gigging, because something like that can get up and walk away. You're right. So, so I found a 73 that I liked, but the neck on it, it was like that typical early 70s Fender thing. It was a bit more of a baseball bat, and it was like, unlike the 63 was just the greatest neck ever. So I took both basses to my luthier, who was this man, Flip Scipio.
What a great
from
name.
Holland, from Holland. And he is one of these mad geniuses of like guitar building. I mean, he is just for fun. He likes sort of taking cheap Japanese electric guitars and making them super playable, just to do it.
Sure.
So he's kind of like this. And I just said, hey, the 63 bass, can you make the 73 bass's neck like the 63? Can you shave it down? And he just looked at me and said, I think so. And he did that. Awesome. And so now the 73 neck is like, it's unlike any other 73 neck that I've ever played. It's brilliant. So that became kind of like, I play that more than the other just because I don't mind taking it out. And it's got EMG, so it's definitely like, it's better in other situations too. But I pretty much play those basses, mostly except for the fretless Precision, which I play when it's sort of called for, but it's not so much at this point.
What is a Lone Star? What is that like? How does a Lone Star?
It's just a kind of Strat that had it came stock with a humbucker in the bridge.
Oh, it's just an HSS so that was new.
Exactly.
It was new then, so they had to give it a certain name.
That was what they called it, to sort of set it apart from others. They gave it because they had like a Roadstar Strat, which was something else. They went with this whole kind of Texas thing. I don't know why.
Well, then they got Texas special pickups.
Yeah, that's why I think, that was their story. But yeah.
So guitar-wise, what else do you play after the Fender? And not that you have to play stuff you actually like picking up.
I have this ESP Ron Wood Telly that I got on one of the tours that I really quite like a lot. I had a red Telecaster for a while, but I wasn't mad about it. when I was in high school, I had a 69 blonde Telecaster.
Wow.
And it was the most amazing guitar ever. But I decided to sell it I was going to get serious about life and give up this music thing when I was like 18 and grow up. And so I got rid of my stuff. And that lasted, I got to school and that lasted like a week and said, what am I doing? That was stupid.
Wow.
So I used that a lot because that sounds completely different than the Fender. I have a couple of Gibsons. I have an SG 61 reissue.
It's a great. It feels so good.
Which is cool. It doesn't stay in tune as I'd like. Which is kind of an SG. I have another one. I have a 68. And it's kind of, I think, either my luck with SGs or SGs just kind of like that. It's like the thin neck and all that. I think it's, and the joint to the butt. It's not very solid. I have a 355 that David actually got me at the end of one of the records because we were mixing on 48th Street and I was kind of ogling it.
And he bought it for you?
Yeah, and because he and Reeves saw me and they got it for me.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he also got me at the end of another record. He gave me a Dan Armstrong fretless bass.
Wow, that is really generous.
Bizarre. I'd never seen one before or since.
So the 355, that's the one with the baritone?
Yes.
So that's is that a new one or an older one?
It was a 78.
Wow.
1978.
Holy shit. Where did you pick that up from?
I think it was Sam Ash 48th
Over on
Street.
48th Street. There's no stores there anymore now at all, is there?
Nothing.
Like, literally
nothing,
zero.
Nothing left. I mean, I think they're gonna make condos out of it like everything else.
Well, you know what's really depressing is there's not many stores in the city at all, and when you go, it's just ridiculous. I've been in a couple last time I'm there just because I like to go when I'm out of town.
Right.
The prices are just obscene, like fucking nuts.
They are. There's just no way.
It's just crazy, man.
Hey, I'm thinking about it. I've not really gotten many guitars in the shop. My 73 fretless I got from somebody. I have a couple that are gifts. I have a 1967 Rick 12.
Wow.
That's brilliant guitar. And I got that for like $200 off somebody. They just didn't, they didn't need it. And I kind of get it because it's not that versatile.
Yeah.
A guitar. It's got an application, but when you need that, there's nothing like it. And I think at the time I was going through like a Tom Petty crush,
There you
I was
go.
like really, and I was like, oh man. And it was crazy. That kind of presented itself at that moment. And I took that as a sign, because stuff like that always happens to me. Oh, I guess I should get this because all of a sudden I'm into this and this just showed up. And for $200, I was like 19. That was still a bit more money, but then than now, but it was still like, wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Good deal.
Yeah. I think I got a Martin acoustic in the same fashion for just not much. God, there was another one I got like that. That was just a, off the cuff kind of purchase from somebody, that ended up being like a brilliant guitar. I can't remember it now though, but, no, I don't know that I ever bought a new instrument other than that Strat from Matt Humanoff. That was like the only.
The 99. Yeah.
Yeah, that and the Music Man. Those were new instruments. So otherwise, not really.
Hey, who's the most interesting guitar player you've produced or engineered or worked in the studio with?
That's easy. That has to be Reeves.
Yeah. Really? Okay.
Absolutely has to be Reeves Gabrels. He's like, there's nobody in that league of guitar playing and sonics and twisted sensibility and just, I guess, sonic mayhem. And he's got this all kind of wrapped up in a package of, Yeah, there was one on the Earthling album. There was one point where I used to go home in the evening, and because I live near there, and I used to say I'm gonna go home and read my daughter a story, and then come back, because it would take me an hour. And they say, yeah, cool. And while I was away, they would maybe do other things. And one time while I was away, Reeves and my assistant Dante made like, I don't know, a half hour's worth of just crazy squeaks and squonks and God only knows what noises. And he's like, okay, now let's use these and let's make some patterns out of it. So I threw a bunch of them in like in a Kai sampler, and we made music out of them.
Do you know who else is like
kind of like that?
Have you ever worked, another New York guy, Transplant? Have you ever worked with Nels Klein?
I never have, but
Yeah.
I've heard that about him too.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah, really good.
Really great. Because I've like Jerry Leonard too. He's another guy I've worked with a lot, and he does amazing things with effects, but his musicality is a little more inside than Reeves. I mean, Reeves is just knocking on some really strange doors, which I quite like. It's he's always pushing some kind of boundary, trying to.
What first record? Do you remember the first CD? Wouldn't be a CD. Do you remember the first album you bought?
The first proper album I bought was Three Dog Night Harmony.
Ah, great record, man.
1972. It was, like there were a few songs on that record I was really into, and it's like because I was just buying 45s up till then. And that was like first record album I got. And that was a great year for songs and music. It was like Alice Cooper and T-Rex, all kinds of stuff. That year was quite amazing. So that was my first real album.
Desert Island Discs, man. Top 3 or 4 or 5. No particular order. Just for today, knee-jerk reaction, because I could ask you that question in an hour. It'll be different.
I know, and I kind of made a list, and I can't even decide from this list. It's just like I've got XTC Skylarking.
Great record.
I've got Who's Next. I've got Kate Bush, Hounds of Love. I've got Police Regata de Blanc. I've got Steely Dan Asia, Bowie Station to Station, Tom Petty Damn the Torpedoes, Allman Brothers Zeta Peach, Joe Jackson Look Sharp. And then I looked at this list and said, there's really nothing that new here. And I was thinking, because I haven't been an album kind of listener in a really long time.
Yeah.
Since I got into the music industry, there just wasn't time, to kind of get into an album like there used to be. And then, of course, after a while, like everyone else, it became mostly about tracks and songs and things like this. So, I began this thing where, whenever I was out, I would like hear a song and I'd go to Shazam and say, figure out what that is. And now I just have a big Spotify playlist of like a couple of hundred songs I've got. And that's kind of how I do it now.
Yeah.
Because habits are different. I mean, and watching your kids, I'm sure you see this. Like,
yeah.
I watched my growing up, and she never bought a CD. Even with parents in the music industry, she didn't buy records. They just didn't do that, And she'd be sort of like, yeah, this week I'm listening to movie soundtracks on YouTube. Like that's, what they just can get into all these things, and it's not presented to them like it was to us, where, we had, I don't know, 3 or 4 radio stations, and, mind you, they were pretty good radio stations.
Oh, they're great.
Then you had friends that would play records, but there was still like that gene pool was not very big. Unlike now, and it's just I get on and I don't know what to do.
Well,
it's so overwhelming. It's like, what do I listen to? Oh, I like that, and then but then and I don't want to be one of these people that like I can't finish a song because I need to hear the next song, and time is the most precious resource, and I don't have a whole lot of it. And, I don't want to be like that, but I find myself going, "Oh shoot, I won't be able to listen to this if I don't stop listening to this one." And it's just, it's amazing, but then again, the superstars thing, it's not what it used to be. Not at all.
I'm old school, man. I still listen to albums. I don't listen to singles. I'm really weird like that.
Well, good for you that you can, commit time and attention to doing that.
Yeah.
I think if I drove more, I would do that. But I'm pretty much a cyclist at home.
Okay.
As a commuter, so I don't have the option.
Yeah, you can't be biking around with headphones on, man. You get wiped out.
Not a great idea. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you 3 more questions, Mark.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
What's the best decision you ever made?
Wow. What is the best decision I ever made? I was trying to think of what that would be, and I don't really know. I think there's not one. I think, given any of the obstacles or whatever, I think I figured out that following the inner voice is the decision to make, and to follow my gut and do what it takes to be a musical person. And try to put that in the front, try to load that in the front end of anything and say, well, as a musical and creative person, should I do this?
Yeah. Okay.
And that seems to be a guiding thing. Sure, like deciding to take the offer to be in David's band was, cool thing. Deciding to get on a plane to Paisley Park, good idea.
Right.
But I think those were all kind of part of the same idea of like, well, this is good for me creatively and musically, and I should go there.
Yeah. So I like what you said. You front end load that. Is this a good musical decision? I do that. My first thing is this the path of least stress? And then whatever else comes, and I pick the answers. So I have something like that as well. Any hobbies or interests outside of music?
There's not a whole lot of time. I really like cycling. It kind of fulfills this nomadic thing that I have.
Yeah.
In a more local fashion, I suppose.
Sure.
Which I think I got from being a kid out in Colorado in this sort of semi-country, and there was all these things to explore, and I've done crazy like 500-mile rides and nutty stuff like that. And I don't know, it's a great way to drop out of reality, and it's healthy, and I don't know, you really achieve something with that. And I think pretty much that's all other than children's a hobby, right?
Yeah. Sort of.
I think that's another one. Yeah, that's kind of, pretty much where it's at for me.
Have you ever done the five borough bike ride? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have. Yeah, I do. That's not one of my favorites because it's only too crowded.
There's 30,000 people there.
Yeah. There's another one in September run by Transportation Alternatives. It's called the New York Century. And that's a 100-mile ride.
Wow.
And it only goes through 4 boroughs and not 5, because the problem with going to Staten Island is you're stuck and you got to take the ferry back.
Oh my God.
And that's no fun. But this other one, and and it goes through these neighborhoods you never knew existed, and it's pretty unbelievable. That I learned a lot doing that ride. Learned a lot about New York City doing that ride. And I've done that for, I don't know, 10, 15 times over the course of the years. Like,
do your kids ride? Because what I was going to say is I did we did the 5 borough. I did that with my older son. That was an incredible, like,
oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Man, that, and for us too, because we had to, fly up here. And then I did it last year, I think, with my wife, which was great. So it was just really,
kids is into it.
Yeah, it was a good family thing, man.
My eldest is one of my daughters does not want to ride. Yeah.
One of your daughters is what?
Yeah, one of them is into it, and one of them is not. Just
great thing to do with kids, man.
Yeah.
And last question, man. Mark, what's been the biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of that's been intentional, and how much is just a natural part of aging?
I would say, and not to be cliche about it, but and to use bad language, which I guess you get to use in a podcast.
Yeah, you can say whatever you like.
As you get older, you give fewer fucks.
Yeah,
you just do. It's like sort of. I used to care a lot more about how the industry viewed me as a musical entity, like they don't see they don't see the whole picture. They only see this part, whatever. And, or care how, people view your accomplishments or your instruments or your face or what have you, and I don't know, I just don't care as much now. And maybe that's because I've achieved a certain amount, or because after a while you realize that doesn't get you anywhere.
Right.
Other than worrying about stuff that's not going to matter anyway. So I think it's mostly that. And also I think having kids is a really amazing reality check for most of us too. I think even as far back as my first one, I was 31. And that changed everything for me. It was just, I put so many things in perspective. Although I was still driven to be a creative person and all, it was sort of, I realized, there are some things we need to prioritize other than, being in a studio 24 hours a day.
No, but that's a big thing when that's all you're doing. So that is a big change.
Yeah, and I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I had this period of complete immersion, completely immersed in a craft. I think that's, really essential. I mean, I'm watching my eldest daughter do that now. She's into photography and video, and she's just doing it. She's eating it for breakfast, and that's what you need to do.
Absolutely.
That's what has to happen to kind of forge your identity and your skill set and all the rest. And, I'm glad I went through that, but it's something I don't think I would want to do now. Like, I know folks they've been on tour for like the past 15 years, and, I mean, it's cool that serves them, but that would never serve me. I think I just wouldn't feel grounded after a while.
Yeah. Well, you've worked hard to have a specific skill set that you don't have to do that. So
I suppose you could look at it that way. I mean, some of the people that do it, I don't really know that I view it as them having to do it, as that's what they want. They really want to do that, and, to be road rats, and that suits them. And, that's great. That's great for them. It wouldn't suit me.
Hey, before we go, what's the name of your play?
It's called Madam Pink.
Pink, P-I-N-K?
P-I-N-K.
Everybody go check out
Madam.
Yeah.
It is about this woman that is having sort of a midlife crisis, and so she gets a pink dog that basically creates all kinds of mayhem and catastrophe for her, and things like this. So that's very highly serious kind of piece, I suppose.
Well, dude, I will look forward to the I will look forward to the movie.
The movie, yes.
With the score composed by you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hey, listen, man,
cool.
I cannot thank you enough for your time. I really enjoyed talking with you, and thank you for sharing all your stories. And you're a super cool guy, and if I could help you with anything, please let me know. I'd love to have you back at some point.
Oh, no worries, man. Thank you very much. It's been nice to chat. All that. So take care.
Yeah, man. Hang on one second. Let me just tell people where to find you, and we'll wrap up. It's Mark Plati, Plati. You can find Mark on both Facebook and Instagram. And also you can, if anybody's interested in working with Mark or connecting with Mark about doing some producing or engineering or mixing, go to his website, which is Mark with a K, MARK-Plati.com, and enter your information. Tell him, go to the contact tab and send. And it'll email him because he's obviously super qualified and has done a lot of cool things. So if you want to work with the guy that worked with Bowie, go check him out. And also check out his play in Paris, Madame Pink, and coming to a theater near you. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it on your social media channels. We appreciate your support. Thanks again to Mark Plati for spending time with us. I appreciate it. Make sure you go to Everyone Loves Guitar, sign up to get on our newsletter list, and so you and I can connect. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.